Dad here, who served in World War II. Dad is now 85 years old, but in excellent health, still works, still drives, lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. Dad, what infantry division were you in World War II?
63rd Division.
And where did you do your basic training at?
Fort McClellan, Alabama.
And where did you do your advanced infantry training at? Is that Camp Van Dorn, Mississippi?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Dad, you went over to France in November of 1944, and I know you've always talked about how cold it was over there. How cold was it when you were sleeping out at night?
Well, we got used to it. It was cold, but we had heavy clothing, and we got used to it and didn't seem to trouble us too much.
What about when you would find like a burned out building? Was that considered a real luxury to have a burned out building?
Oh yeah, if anything that had a floor in it, even if it didn't have a roof, just to get off of the cold ground, which is often covered with snow.
What about showering? How often? I don't think people realize how tough it was that you didn't get, a warm shower every couple days. How long would you go between showers?
Oh, it could be weeks, really.
Yeah, so you'd go 3-4 weeks without a shower?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. And what weapon did you fire in the war?
60mm mortar.
Okay, and you were the mortar chief?
I started out as a crew member, and I was made the leader of the team.
Okay, and wasn't there an episode like the last week of the war where there was a German soldier across a little creek? Could you relate that story to us?
Yeah, I don't think it was. It was close to the end of the war. It wasn't the last week or anything. They were in foxholes across this little river, and we were just all sitting there doing nothing. And he decided to make a dash for what apparently was a bigger foxhole up closer. Instead of further back, he came up closer, which didn't make too much sense. And the fellow said, "Oh, let's drop a shell right down in his hole."
Yeah.
And we fired one, and it was too short. And so we fired another one, and that was a little too long. And they said, "We'll get him this time."
So you would like fire a short one and a long one to get to range with the mortar?
We just didn't
Yeah.
have a good shot.
Yeah, so what happened then?
Then since we had one in front of him and one behind him, we could easily have put one right in the shell. And the other team members were all excited about doing it. I said, "No, the war's almost over, and I just can't see doing that." It was a young fellow just like us. Oh, they were furious. Just turned the air blue with profanity for having no power other than just being a corporal.
And they were privates?
Yeah, and or PFCs maybe.
Okay.
And I said, "No, we're not going to do it, period." And that was it.
Okay, and so today there's probably a bunch of little German great-grandkids of that fella running around that wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you.
Very possible.
Okay, well
I just hope someday in some way I find out that man and hope he'll live a good life.
Dad, what was it like with the German 88mm artillery?
It made a very frightening sound as the shells would come over, and that would just turn everybody off and just scare them to death.
Did you could you tell where it was going to land based on the sound?
Oh, not too accurately. You knew it was coming towards you, or if it was off to one side, or it was going over your head. But sometimes you couldn't really be sure. Okay. And did you ever hear German tanks at night? Oh, all the time. What was that like to hear that? Very frightening. Sometimes it was in a distance, sometimes they were much closer. Yeah, and you couldn't tell how many there were, could you? With the tank track sounds? You didn't know how many tanks there were? Well, I don't remember if we could do that. I think we could make a rough judgment, but when it was really noisy, it could be a few tanks or many tanks. And didn't you say right at the end of the war you guarded 100 Germans with a pistol? Uh-huh. And well, even more than that. Did they give you any trouble? Not at all. They were only too glad to be in a camp like that where they'll soon be released. Didn't you say on Easter Sunday in 1945 you were marching down some road in Germany and an American Jeep hit a landmine? Uh-huh. What was that like? Well, that's just what happened. It was somewhere a little off to the side, like maybe a half a block away. Mm-hmm. And we were marching along, and there was firing and shooting and this and that in the background. And here this Jeep hit a mine and just blew it right up in the air, really high. And it came crashing down, and we just kept right on marching past. Nothing we could do.
Did you know what happened to the men?
No.
Yeah, okay. And one final thing, Dad. You went to Patton's funeral. What was that like?
Well, that was in Heidelberg, and we were in Stuttgart, a suburb of Stuttgart. And we had a Jeep. And our chaplain, who was just a few years older than I was, but he was a lieutenant, decided he'd like to go to the funeral, and he decided we'd take along some of his friends who were also young officers. And so I was happy with that. And we got up there to Heidelberg. I forget how far it was, a fairly good distance. And we went to the funeral, and sat in the balcony row on the right side as you standed in there watching the stage. And everything was fine. And then we decided it's time to come home. And the Jeep was acting so funny. And I didn't know why. It was just fine going up. And it drove. But it just had a very strange feel to it. And I just wondered if it was going to break down along the way. And I guess it was either later in the trip or the next day or sometime, I found that here it was in four-wheel drive instead of two-wheel, and you weren't supposed to do that. It was hard on the Jeep and hard on the passengers. And I know I didn't leave it there, so somebody fiddled with it while we were at the funeral, and I didn't notice that.
Okay. Okay, Dad. Well, appreciate you participating in another video for my YouTube collection. Okay. Thanks for your service.
You're welcome, Chris.